I've been talking on mute. I'll start again. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Hacking HR panel on Mastering Resilient Team Building. Do you know that teams that embrace resilience are 30% more likely to overcome unforeseen challenges? And this is a testament to the power we hold when we foster resilience within our teams. Today, as we will unpack actionable strategies, stories, and we've got an amazing panel to join us to bring forward insights into building resilient teams across different environments. As we navigate today's discussion, I just encourage you to participate in the chat and we'll get going. So can we bring forward our amazing panelists, please? Excellent. Good morning, everyone, again. Hello. Bit of a challenge with being on mute to start with. So I guess as we begin our journey this morning on resilient team building, I'd just like we'll go around the virtual room from top down to the bottom. And as we do that, can you introduce yourself, a bit about your background, and maybe a moment in your career where you witnessed the power of resilience within a team, just quite briefly. So if we start with Jen, and we'll go around.
Hi, good morning, everyone. And Rod, don't worry. You'd think after 4 years of being in the virtual environment, at least the mute thing would cease to be an issue. But alas, it happens to all of us. So, hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Princeton, New Jersey this morning. And I call myself a resilience builder. I'm not sure if more of my resilience skills have been built from being a mother of 3 over the last 14 years. Shout out to all the parents out there. Truly, I think it's the best training ground possible. Or if it came from my, 25 plus years in human resources. So this is a topic I've become increasingly passionate about, especially sort of over the last decade or so, as I've seen, I think the toll that a lack of a deep understanding of what resilience really is or could be, and the toll that takes on really everyone, workplaces, teens, which is very personal to me as well. A specific moment, I don't have to look back too far. I think about what my team went through at the beginning of the pandemic, and I know all of us just have so many stories navigating, through that time. And I think a lot of the lessons there for me hopefully will emerge out of this conversation today about understanding the importance of looking at the individual as well as the collective, because they are related and completely different as well. So I'm excited to be here with all the panelists.
Thanks, Jen, and welcome, Kim.
Hi, Kim Lee. I'm from Northern California, so completely different time zone than Rod. And so thanks for hanging in there with us, Rod. I have been doing HR or in HR for more than 25 years. Started in the Bay Area and learned all through the tech. So we've had a couple of different, big changes within my career with regard to from the .com bubble to burst and, all the different economic challenges, which really brings, resiliency into the forefront, needing to be resilient and go with the change, the pandemic also. So that is something that I have been grateful that I've been able to build resiliency within my team, and happy to share, looking forward to sharing some of those tips and tricks.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Renzi. I am joining you guys from Dubai. So it's good evening here and good morning to wherever you are. So I am the managing director of Perky People. It's an HR consulting business. And to your question, Rod, personal experience about resiliency, I think prior to me setting up my own business, I was in my previous life with this company, almost every year, this reorganization. And I was heading the group people experience at that time. And for me, like trying to create that experience and then only to find out by the end of the year something's going to change. So it feels, or it felt like, you're always starting from scratch, because there's always a dip where people feel like, oh yeah, things are getting better, like yeah, we've enhanced a lot of things, oh no, we're changing all of that again. So it's because resilience is really our ability to adapt, to thrive, like to basically navigate all these challenges head on with your team members. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert, and I wouldn't say like challenges and setbacks are easy for me or walk in the park for me, but I still keep reminding myself like there's always that light at the end of the tunnel when you're faced with setbacks. So yeah, and I'm happy to be joining you guys.
Thanks, and welcome, Kerry.
Hey, Rod, nice to see you. And
Yes.
everybody else, it's great to talk today, because doing these is actually part of the resilience building in my life. I get to hear and learn lots of things from everybody on these calls, so thank you. My background, I have been in the people space for all of my career, not uniquely in HR, but looking at how organizations thrive through change. And so resilience, often in the context of technology becoming part of how people change the way they do their jobs. But if I look at really this topic, a friend of mine wrote a book called Prosilience, Linda Hoops, about this. We talked about this pre-COVID, and it was funny to look back and see what we learned. And one of the things when I think about memories that I have, Rob, when you ask what are the two things, one, I built a team during COVID of 25 people that didn't exist, and we were a global team. And so when I think about what worked and what didn't, to your comment earlier, Jen, hopefully I'll get to share some of that today around how we built a team and then made that become something that felt like a team versus just a bunch of people who happened to be doing the same thing. And then I actually left that company where I had been for 18 years and joined a new company during COVID. And if I look now at building resilience for myself, living through resilience individually during COVID and then beyond, but also then thinking about how teams come together, being part of a team, building a team, and how the intentionality that I think is needed both personally and as a group can really come to life to help make that resilience build and thrive. So thanks for being here, and happy to have a chance to be a part of this conversation. Alex, over to you.
Kia ora e te whānau, Alex Howson. I'm beaming in from New Zealand. So it's 4 a.m.
4 a.m. Nice.
But I'm really thrilled to be, hence the garage background. So I apologise in advance. I'm having to hide out so I don't wake up everyone in the neighbourhood. Yeah, look, I'm really pleased to be here this morning. I think when I reflect back on my career, which is a combination, a weird combination, probably of 25 years in operations and HR, I'd probably draw my more personal experience through break points where, as an operational leader, I've had to lead a team through a tender process for their own jobs. It's quite common in aviation, and it would be for those of you around the globe. It's not that common in Australia and New Zealand to tender in that way. And I think really a lot of the skill sets was, and if I walked away saying one thing that grew me as a person, would have been the leading from the front, demonstrating obviously what I was asking them to do. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to being part of the conversation today. It's really exciting. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, we're from all over the world, so we've got a bit of resilience on this call in itself. So maybe just to get us started, a very simple question is just how do we define resilience within the context of a team, and why do we think that it's really critical for success? So who wants to have a start to that one?
I'll jump in. Everyone's being really
Let's go.
shy. To me, resilience, I think, is adaptability. And, we've all had to individually or collectively gain more of that in the last 4 years, as Jen pointed out. We all went from being together to not being together. But if I think of resilience in a team, it's adaptability, whether it's marketplace pressures, whether it's internal organizational shifts, whether it's changes of strategy for your organization, changes in your team members. As we flex and flow, I think as a team, whether it's the HR team supporting an organization and helping to extend that to the broader organization, or doing it within your own team, to me, it's the ability to collectively keep buoyancy and energy in a place that, as each of us contribute well or not on our best day, that we can keep the ball moving forward and help each other rise, to the best of the occasion, and keep the team really that buoyant, adaptable group that it needs to be, so that we're all getting done the best work we can get done. And Alex, I see you're off mute, so I want you to jump in after me.
Yeah, I think it is about that authenticity in your own leadership as well, and making sure that and that's whenever I talk about resilience, I put trust in the same sentence. If you people need to be able to know who you are, you need to know who you're working with, and have the curiosity to understand and inquire about where people are at, but similarly and understanding that you're in a position of modeling. So, if there is a position, it's okay to be vulnerable, because we're all there at times, but it's the way that you bounce back with that vulnerability to show people how to healthily manage your own well-being, for example. Working 24 hours a day as a leader and then asking your team to be resilient is not the right thing, I believe. And if you're not looking after yourself, you can't look after others, in that old adage. So that's all I had to build on that, Kerry.
Some great points from both Kerry and Alex. Who wants to share next?
I want to add to that. I think Alex said something really important about trust, and also building that authenticity as a leader. I think there's massive element about that open communication. So when it comes to being resilient and building resilient team, it's understanding what their pains are, and also helping them and guiding them how to navigate that change. And maybe accepting as a leader that you may not have answers to everything. So it's also okay to tell your team members, hey, listen, we're in this together. I may not know, but we will navigate this together. So that being authentic about whether you know or you don't know, just show up and tell your team as well, because that's how you can build trust with them. And by you communicating openly with them, I think together you can build that resilience.
Thanks, Renzi.
I agree. I was, I was a sports fan. So, in football, you talk about bend, don't break, or, bend, don't break. And then the resiliency as far as rubber bands and things like that. You can't stretch and leave it stretched. You have to have that give and take. You have to, as a leader, and, as you pointed out, if you're working 16, 17 hours a day, and, you're working 6-7 days a week, that's an example that you're providing your employees that you don't want. That's not going to build resilience. That's going to build a burnt out team. It's really being close to your team, letting them have that space to tell you how they're doing. And then, yes, maybe we don't have all the answers right now. So let's work on this together. We're going to problem solve. We're going to, mistakes might happen. We're going to work through those. And your team knowing that they can raise their hand and let you know something's not working is really important.
I don't know how on this is my third Hacking HR panel in 6 weeks on this topic, and I've been focused on resilience, in earnest for the last year, and yet my definition evolves every single conversation. Kerry, I have not heard the word buoyancy in this context before, and I wrote it down. I just love that. So I'm hearing trust, authenticity, and space. But I don't know that I've found a definition yet of what resilience is, because it's so many things to so many different people in every different situation. And I think the more we try to pin it down, the more we can misuse what it is. I heard a term this morning on a podcast, and I don't even know, I can't even credit it. So it's someone brilliant, I'm sure, said, but they called it post-traumatic growth. And it was really interesting to me. I'd never heard that term before, and had only really heard, post-traumatic, stress. And I thought about, there's trauma with the capital T and the lowercase t. And I think when we're talking about workplaces, it's usually the lowercase kind, right? It's the nonstop change. It's the environment that we're in. but it struck me this morning and thinking about adding that to sort of my definition about it's not just the adaptability and the trust and getting through the change and staying connected through that, but it's how we grow from that opportunity and take that so that we don't continue to keep going back to that same place that we were before. So here's to just constantly evolving definitions, I think.
Can I just add, because I think you triggered something for me there, Jen. When I reflect about resiliency as well, I start thinking about people are not resilient just for the sake of being resilient. People become resilient because they have that long-term goal, or at least they're aiming for that big dream. They're wanting to do something. So they are driven by their current, they're driven by that big dream. And regardless of what's happening, they just keep persevering and keep pushing through to make things happen. I thought I'd just share that.
No, that's really good, Rance. And that sort of comes into the next question in a little bit. And I think, Kim, you brought some concepts of sport as well. I'm going to ask you can you share a personal story where resilient teamwork turned a challenge into an opportunity? And I'll just share a little bit before we get started. Is that, like, at the moment I'm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, where I'm helping coach in a national volleyball tournament where we're looking at preparing athletes, high performance athletes for the Olympics. And so you can imagine there's a lot of resilient teamwork happening, and really the key here in volleyball, when you're playing beach volleyball, it's two players. You need to be resilient, and a key part of that is supporting your teammates to be both successful. So that's my little story of what I'm up to today, but I'll just share it to the group.
I'll piggyback on that, and I'm going to use sports, and I'm going to use me because it actually was very recent. This weekend, I raced in a rowing race, and actually in 3 of them. But we're a team, so same idea as you look at work teams. We're a team of 9 people. We are virtual. We don't train together all the time. We all prepare ourselves. It's actually very similar to a virtual work team where we all do our work independently, and periodically we come together to do something which is hopefully amazing. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but generally speaking, it's pretty good. And so we go in with some degree of expectations around what's going to happen. We raced the prior weekend and we won. Yay. We came into the second weekend and we raced and we came second. And in our first, it was 2 races. And in our first one that day, we did decently. In our second one, we didn't perform to our best. And we're all high expectations people who all want to have a great outcome. As you were just sharing around, what's that thing you're striving for? And the next day we had our final race. And this regatta is a combination of all 3 results to get your final outcome. And we needed to have the race of a lifetime on the 3rd day to win overall. We had a pretty damn good race, in fact, but it wasn't quite enough to win. It was enough to win that event and beat the people who were going to beat and others. So we left. So to your point of post-traumatic growth, we came in with a different game face the second day. We are a good team, but we were tested and we didn't test well. We tested okay. We didn't test as well as we wanted. And we came in with a different mindset. You could see it in everyone's eyes and their behavior and their function. And despite not winning, our performance was something we were extraordinarily proud of. And so we left with a sense of accomplishment and a sense of success and a lesson, to your point of how do you learn from it. We're racing again in a few weeks. We've left with a memory of don't be complacent. Don't think it's going to be okay. You have to go in with that, in this context, with that mindset from the moment we started. And that lesson will change the way we race together next time with some of the same people and not quite the same. So very much like a virtual team where you trust that everyone is going to show up ready. You trust that everyone's doing what they need to do and they're alone and you can't see them. We trust that our coach has pulled together the right plan for all of us to be successful. And then we adapt regularly, moment by moment, stroke by stroke. But certainly as a group, the collective experience of how to bring the right attitude, support each other, believe in each other, and then learn and adapt was something that I absolutely agree with both Kim and you, Rod. I think athletics and work come together a lot. And they test the vulnerability that we often have tested at work as well. where you can succeed and you can fail very plainly, often more plainly in sports than at work, but a great lesson. So thanks. I like that we've gone there. Thank you. Who'd like to go next? Alex, I see you're off mute. I'm going to turn it back to you again.
Thanks, Kerry. Well, I think that was one of the points that I've just been reflecting upon, is that deliberacy. So that making sure in all times that you're practicing resilient behaviors, and I think making sure that your teams are working towards a framework, and it's sort of practice repeat in terms of looking at how you move through change, what your reactions can be, how you're looking after yourself, bringing in that consistency, which you're absolutely right. And I've been involved in sports myself a long time, now in administration, thankfully. But insofar as that, if people are expecting, people think about resilience and they think their reaction to this sort of very peaked or poor experience, when in fact it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, insofar as learning every day about how you react to certain situations that are presented to you that are surprising, that how did that become a surprise when it shouldn't have become a surprise, type of thing. So yeah, that's all I wanted to build on that, but I certainly do engender that in my teams, and how we coach others in the business is to make sure that they are practicing every day how they react to different ways personally, and what their trigger points are to say, actually, what do I do when I'm not feeling so great about this? And to make sure that they're showing up really, really well for everybody, for themselves first, and keep bringing that thing back to, who do you want to let down today? Nobody, including yourself.
I have a story, actually two different examples. One just very brief. So there's, I know many of us have seen, there's plenty of people who've been laid off recently, and I want to say recently over the course of the last year or so. And I decided to, put myself out there and become a layoff buddy. Two people going through the same thing and kind of coaching and cheering and holding accountable. And my layoff buddy had been unemployed, I want to say about a year, and she had been, she lives on the East Coast, and she was very targeted in her what company she wanted to work for. And she said that she actually just got a job last week. She starts next week, and she had, it almost brought tears to my eyes, because she was, she knew the companies that she wanted to work for. She was networking. She was doing all of that. She was doing intro calls, everything that she could be doing. But, that's a lot. It's a lot to go through. It's a lot of, getting yourself out there and put you in and everything else. So I was really proud of her. And she actually said it to me. She's like, that's a lesson in resiliency, is, she just continued to march forward, and she got a job at one of the companies she had been targeting. And the other is that I have, over the last 8 years or so, worked in private equity. And I don't know if anyone else is, familiar with that, but, that's a lesson in resiliency all in itself. There's ongoing change. You have to do all kinds of different things, building, teams, but lean teams, and this change and that change, and highly acquisitive. So, and building my teams out in that has been, definitely eye-opening, as far as how to make sure that they have the space, how to make sure that you, as a leader, see and observe when your team members seem to be showing signs of, being burnt out or needing a break, and really adhering to those. So those were my two.
Just one sentence before Jen or Jennifer jumps in. One of the things on big SAP projects I've often said for people, they have to have a high tolerance for ambiguity. You have to have, there's people who can live in that private equity project shift change mode, and there's people for whom that is just constant stress and disruption and hard. So yeah, I hear you. Jen, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah. So thinking about a personal story, if any of you, part of how I express myself through LinkedIn and the work that I do is integrating personal stories. So I'm going to do that. Thank you for the sports examples. Carrie, I was going to ask about your bike behind you, but now you're a rower and a cyclist. I'm guessing you're a triathlete or something. Yeah. Okay, good. I've got you picked. So, so I'll actually share a story. Late October of 2012. I guess I'm the only East Coast U.S. person here, but we were getting ready to prepare for a historic hurricane, Hurricane Sandy. It ended up being truly historic. I, in addition, was planning the home birth of my second child. And my first home birth was exceptional. You know, I sort of went against the grain and you know, kind of all the naysayers thought that I was crazy, but it was all perfect. And so why should this be any different? You know, enter Wolf Blitzer on CNN, state of emergency, and my family's calling me, and my mom's flight gets canceled from Canada, and the power's out. And I remember going through these, you know, sort of these days leading up to it and just saying, I just need to calm. I turned off all the outside noise. I just couldn't deal with it. You know, luckily my husband was running the 40-foot power cord to the neighbors who somehow had power to get, you know, power to the house. You know, long story short, I went into labor the night of the hurricane. And when I think about now, I wasn't analyzing it from a resilience perspective in the moment, I can assure you, but with hindsight, I can see how the dynamic of the team was just, I mean, literally was life giving. So the team that I had in place, we all had a plan. It was not this plan. Everybody had to adapt. They had to adapt their expectations. They had to put away their, you know, put really aside their own set of personal concerns and fears. We had to work through nonstop changing. The roads were closed. All of our backup hospitals were closed. And not to mention just the frenetic energy. And I think often in a workplace, when there's an unforeseen change, a layoff, a reorganization, an acquisition, private equity day to day, you know, those types of things bring so much unexpected change. And usually what comes up for everybody is that fear response. And when we're thinking from a fear response, we don't do our best thinking. And truly, as I think about that time going through, I was in labor for 50 some odd hours at home, just trying to go through it and working through that fear of what, you know, was going to happen. My daughter was born healthy, and I just have so many people to thank for, you know, for the role they played there. But I do think there's so many parallels to a work environment of how much we have to be able to, you know, Renzi, as you said it, focus on that big vision. In this case, it was, you know, literally bring a person into the world, take in new data. I constantly am saying, you know, new data, now what? It's a motto I live by, because we have to constantly be taking new things in and assessing. We may have had the best laid plans 5 minutes ago and something just happened, and now I need to make my next best decision. So I love thinking about all the different ways and helping people, especially in a workplace setting when I'm coaching managers or leaders and they're really stuck with a workplace thing. I love going to, you know, talk to me about something you've overcame, you know, with sports or with your family or something like that, because it's so easy then to go, oh yeah, I did do that. It just, you know, it feels different at the time, but you know, we're one person, and how we build resilience on the sports field or in a birthing tub or, you know, or at the workplace. I think there's a lot of parallels that we can draw.
That was really amazing, everyone. And Jen, you've linked to my next question, which is around challenges and overcoming them. And so I'm just curious on what are the common barriers to building a resilient team, and how have you successfully navigated these challenges? Would like to.
Can I start on this one? I think one of the biggest barriers is around mindset. We're talking a lot about like high tolerance for ambiguity. We want people to be adaptable. We want people to persevere. But the reality is not everyone is built to operate that way. Oftentimes, at least where I operate in this region, you would have people working for a company. It can go as high as like 40 years, 50 years, whatever. On the other hand, the entry level positions, you know, they're the ones who are basically leaving their company every 1 year or every 2 years. So those people, they're kind of like built around like, okay, I can operate this way. I'm okay with ambiguity and whatnot. But the ones who actually have stayed in the organization for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, the biggest culprit is their mindset. they don't want to step out of their comfort zone, and they don't want to change the way you do things to be adaptable and whatnot. And guess what? For me, at least my personal experience around resilience, I think as a manager over time, I realized that resilience doesn't come automatically to everyone. Resilience is something, if you have that, that's great, that's your talent. But as a manager, we have to be conscious enough when it comes to our adaptability, how we persevere when things are actually challenging. And how do we do that? How do we make sure we also build those skill sets for our team members to make sure that we don't just ask them, be resilient, be adaptable? Because some people, maybe they don't know where to begin, or maybe the mindset is very different. When things are hard, they start looking at complaining at things that are not working. But actually what we're trying to ask them is like, okay, so this is not working. Being resilient means like looking at what else can we do? What are the opportunities for us to do things differently?
I think a big part of trying to build this into your team is showing vulnerability yourself and building that trust within your team. There's there's a lot that goes into it, and as I said, as a leader, you need to observe your team. You need to lead by example. So showing your own, I don't want to say frustrations. There's a difference between I'm frustrated about the situation and I feel your pain kind of thing, being empathetic. So I think that having that space and giving people that opportunity. And also one thing that I like to do with my teams is encourage peer connection. So my teams typically are global. And so making sure that they're connecting and able to share their challenges and frustrations and kind of talk each other through it as well. And then, bring things to me and have that safe space. But, you need to have that peer support. You need to have the vulnerability. You need to have that feel safe to share your challenges and break down those silos so that people are actually working together as opposed to everyone kind of working in their own space, feeling that frustration.
I'll piggyback on both of you. I think intentionality for sure is key to build resilience. And I'll go back, all the way to Ken Blanchard and situational leadership. You're absolutely right. There are different kinds of people. Frankly, the kind of people all of us who get on these calls are probably not the people who struggle with change. We're not them. They're not necessarily inclined to probably sit and talk about how difficult it is to navigate through change. So understanding who on your team is built in each respective way and what they bring to the team, because there's reasons they're all on the team to be there in the first place, whether they're the leader or the follower or the glue or whatever role they play in that team. Understanding that I think is critical, and then being able, Kim, to your point of connecting with people either individually or collectively, but giving people space. So I look at really tactical things. If you've got a virtual team, making sure that there's some time on calls like this, if we're doing something as a team, that are focused. We're going to take a minute and write down your thoughts before we share them, because otherwise all of us who like to speak steal all the air. If I look at team building, like we would do intentional team building, we had sort of two tracks when we first built that team I was talking about. One track was the things we had to get done, and that was things that had a deadline where we knew we had to be tracking to execute whatever it was. And another track was talking about our team, and we didn't put the same deadline of time on that. We had a standing call for that, and we worked through that as a team as it took. And it wasn't, we're going to talk about our values and in the next 7 minutes our values will be solved. It was, we're going to talk about our values, but we're going to talk about it until we've exhausted that, and then we're going to get to the next topic and how we work together. And so we had two separate tracks, and the one around how to build us as humans and as a group was not time boxed in the same way as the things that we knew we had to get done by Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, or next week. So I think the intentionality, both in terms of as a manager, as a teammate, to see and reach people where they're at, but to create specific opportunities for individuals in the group to grow. I'll also say, I did not ever have the chance to get that team together. They were 25 people all over the world, and it would have cost 6 figures to get us together, frankly. And that wasn't something that was ever going to be viable. We did collect up who we could collect up. Some of us have met each other since that team has moved on. When we've been in the right places and countries, we've met each other for the first time to meet up and say hi, because a term I used a long time ago, the hottest fires grow the strongest steel. And we went through a lot of hot fires together. And that resilience came from all of us, and we have those memories. But I would say when you can, if you can, is also getting people together. Last week, I managed to meet with a team that I've worked with now for a year and a half. I had never met 2/3 of them. And I was reminded, I've always been an advocate now for where we're primarily remote or hybrid, that you bring people together for purposeful time. And we did just that. We had 2.5 days of purposeful time, which would have been like an offsite. And we got done in 2.5 days, what would have taken us at least 3 months if we looked for another hour and another hour and another hour. So I would also say it is an investment, but where you can, bringing people together to laugh, have breaks, have lunch, see each other eye to eye, have more time than we need to finish this time box discussion now, builds a different kind of resilience and understanding, so that vulnerability that we've all mentioned comes out more naturally. Alex, I see you're off mute, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
No, look, I was going to sort of build on that. That's an environment of psychological safety. We talk about that a lot at work, with regards to in our work and in our teams, and meeting people where they're at, and talking about, I was talking earlier about with regards to using that deliberacy in the way that you're speaking and the way that you're showing up, being extremely well planned, using words like psychologically safe. So my commitment to you is to provide an environment that's psychologically safe, and hold me accountable if I don't. But please make sure that you give me the courtesy of telling me what I've done to actually making sure that sort of feedback and that conversation loop is always happening. But also one of the strategies that we employed during COVID, strangely enough, and New Zealand was one of the strictest in the world in terms of the lockdowns, and we went into one of them for a year. And in broadcasting, because we work in a studio, nobody could go in except those people that were in the studio. So again, we were building teams. We were still recruiting, because at that time, the place that people did want to do is they wanted to watch television, thankfully, and use their internet, and they're the two services that we provide. So we weren't hit from it, but we were hit from a huge customer uptake perspective. So we did need to recruit, and we didn't meet anybody. So one of the parts that our HR team, we didn't build our HR team during that time. We just adapted to the work. So the work at that point was recruitment. But one of the terms that we use, and we have quite a strong commitment to Te Tiriti, or the Maori lens, from an Indigenous cultural perspective here in New Zealand, and it's called mana enhancing behaviours. Again, calling that out to say, not only am I going to make you and provide you with a psychologically safe environment, but I will engage in mana enhancing behaviour and encouraging you all to do the same. And what it means is I'm going to deliberately start my conversations with, how are you? And I really want to celebrate something I saw you do. And that doesn't need to be a leader doing that, but it's calling out each other to say, that was really cool, and I noticed. And so some of that, again, being deliberate, putting that time at the beginning of the meeting to say, I'm below the line today, and I'd like to have some of that conversation before we get started so I can be present here today. Or, hey, I'm just so buzzed with what I've seen over the last few weeks of what you've been doing and what we've been doing together, or what I noticed. Thank you. But making sure that is structured. And I do think that does build a lot of trust and energy. And again, people feeling confident and innovative, because that's where it ends up. You want people to be innovative. And I think that if people are feeling safe, they're going to take better risks and use their judgment better. So we talk about the return on investment, private equity. I had to laugh. We're almost surrounded by that in media. So we have to talk about return on investment all the time, not just the fluffy HR stuff, because they're not that interested, as you know. So that's what I thought to add.
Well, that's
Alex,
really good.
you just brought to I was just gonna say on the when you're talking about sort of the allowing the time and the space for, how are you? There was a brilliant mental health campaign in the UK a couple years ago called Ask Twice. You can look it up on YouTube, and it's a short clip of two gentlemen walking through the forest and they're hiking or whatever, and the one guy, like a tree literally falls on top of him, and his friend says, in this lovely British accent, how are you, mate? And he's like, I'm fine. He says, are you really? Right. And it's that idea of asking twice. And I think that especially in the pandemic, a lot of companies really started to lean in, and I would say perhaps over index on the check-in, right? Everything, I mean, at least on the Zoom calls, how are you? How are you? How are you? And recognizing that some people will just spill all the dirt, right? They're quite comfortable, talking about themselves in that environment. And a lot of people, especially in a work setting, are not comfortable doing that. And so this idea of asking twice, and I think that I'm always looking for tactical tools for managers. And I like to think about, how can you have your finger on the pulse of each individual and develop that type of relationship. When I say a personal relationship, it doesn't mean, you're in all the dirt with them and every last bit about them, but it's personal enough to know when something is off. There's tools for this. I used to use a great tool there. My team would fill in these sort of slider things before every one-on-one. How are they feeling about growth and learning and their accomplishments and their well-being? And so, if one of them was normally kind of a hard rater, they normally like 5 to 6, fine. As long as I saw 5 to 6s, I knew well enough that that was normal for them. But if they were like usually a 9, 10 kind of person and they show up with a 5 or 6, you can be damn sure the agenda gets thrown out the window, and we start there. And I had a really, poignant experience with a team member because I developed that with her, and she said I recognized that she had depression before her husband did, and was able to support her in, support, sort of mandated her in taking some time, to go and help herself to get well. So I think this like finger on the pulse thing of our well-being is just an essential part of this resilience conversation. Someone, I don't remember who here, brought up burnout. You can't have this conversation without talking about burnout. And I think that's one of the things we get wrong in the workplace right now. We just go from one challenge to the next, the next, the next, the next. We might stop and have like a PPK or a lessons learned little conversation and quick jot down what went wrong. And then it's like, okay, the next meeting is, what are we going to do next? And I think that is at the core of the workplace burnout. It's the mass exodus among caregivers and women in the workplace right now. So we need to take a collective pause and slow down and start to build some of these, very, very simple, though not always easy, behaviors that often start in that one-to-one relationship, peer or manager to direct report.
I've just got a thing. I'll piggyback on that, Jen. I used a great tool with that team that I had broadly called Cloverleaf, Cloverleaf Me, and the other part of it was a lot of learning about your team. So there was a lot of the Myers-Briggs Strengths Finders, what decision-making styles do you have, what communication styles do you have. So it was a lot of learning about how each other functions, because you weren't naturally getting that, or weren't going to be able to get together and do that. And it also had things like, I'm meeting with Jen today. Reminder, Jen is like this. These are the kinds of things, the way that Jen works. I'm meeting with Kim today. This is how Kim works. And so it also gave you some reminders of how to engage with people who might be of different styles. The other thing I would say to psychological safety, a lot of the communication and the over communicating, I think, came from fear in when we weren't working together and people weren't used to hybrid. So did managers think that everyone was at home watching Netflix and eating bonbons? And did employees think that their managers didn't know what they were doing? So how can you give facts? And another part that I look at now is really facts are friendly. So how do you get visibility into understanding what work is happening, which can feel invasive and can feel like you're being checked on, but also is a place to shine. So if there's ways to see how work is occurring in a really objective manner, that's also another way for people to be seen and to be recognized, who aren't necessarily making all the sound and all the noise, and for a manager to know, is the right work happening at the right time? So I look, now at the companies are using process mining or task mining to understand what people are doing. If it's done in a way to make the organization thrive, and it's not done as a punitive behavior, it's a really great way to highlight good work, good ideas, and make that part, the factor-friendly approach, something that in the absence of day-to-day, side-by-side work, really helps the right things happen and the right sense of safety to exist as well. Kim, I see you're off mute.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of take it in a little bit different direction. I think Jen was the one who spoke to it a little bit. Understanding what we're all working towards as well. So if we're doing a whole bunch of different things and, for PE, we're going to integrate these people. Now we're going to go over here and maybe even do due diligence for the next one. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and you just, put your head down and get it done. But that's where the burnout starts happening. And I think that that's where the resiliency starts to really be tested. If you know where you're, the direction you're going, and you know what the goal is, and we're all working towards it. It doesn't mean everyone has awesome days every single day, but it's just, I know what I'm doing this for. I understand where we're going, and I understand what this impact is going to be. So I'm going to stick in there so I can help the company. Or, as someone said, it's not everyone has those same traits, and so maybe it's not the right place, but when people are all working together, working towards the same goal and have the same, they're just all working together towards it, I think really helps as well. And leaders in HR, we can certainly help with that.
Can I also add, I like what Alex said, and also Carrie, about like the team building and also the recognition, at least in the area where I'm operating. These two things are super important, but often neglected. For example, team building, people or managers always think that team building has to be expensive. You have to do it offsite. You have to spend $10,000 and hundreds and thousands of dollars to make people happy. But the reality is, team building can be integrated in your team meeting. You can do like a 5-minute activity, 10-minute activity. You can do it also once a week in the office, where instead of spending $1,000 going bowling and having barbecue, make it more purposeful. Yes, you can do team bonding, but sometimes if you're not intentional about team building or team bonding, you will often see people talking to each other who are normally friends in the workplace. The ones who are not friends with others, they're basically sitting by themselves, waiting to be talked to by other people. And then the second thing around recognition, again, I had once manager who told me like, oh, I don't really give appreciation and recognition, because the moment I said something, thank you, and overpraise someone, they think they are sent by the heavens here to solve everything in this organization. My thinking on this is be generous. Say thank you as much as you can, but don't just say thank you for the sake of saying thank you. Be very specific about what you're saying thank you for. And it goes a really long way. Just recently, it was actually last week or a couple of weeks ago, I was working with a client, and this person I was working with for the last 3 months, because the person went on maternity, I sent like a big thank you letter to her, copying her manager, and outlining why I was actually thanking her. And then I spoke to basically someone who she was sitting with, and I was told she asked me was there something wrong? Is she gonna get in trouble? To me, it clearly says a lot about maybe the people are not used to receiving genuine feedback from people. So the moment someone says something nice, they think does he want something from me? Is he hiding something? Am I gonna get kicked out? So I think building that culture of recognition is super important when it comes to building resiliency as well, because by you recognizing and appreciating people, you're also validating those very good behaviors that you want them to continue doing in order for them to build those skills that we're talking about when it comes to being resilient.
Thanks, Renzi. That was really good, and it builds on. I invited at the start people in the audience to make some comments, ask some questions, and someone left the statement that I believe culture plays a huge role in shaping resilient teams, and you just mentioned culture. So the question to the panel is just, where does culture come into it? How do we build that in relation to resilience?
I'll jump in. I said to our chat internally here, there's some psychological safety missing in that space you were just describing. If I look at role modeling, to me, is one of the ways that you can really start to shape and form culture. Certainly, the culture of a whole organization is influenced by each of us and all of us, but none of us own the whole thing. And if I think about culture that you can create within your team, the example you just gave, Renzi, of that being unusual, as you continue to consistently praise or recognize or communicate in the way that you do, then that will become predictable. Just like when Jen was saying she'd ask everyone your scale of 1 to 10, somebody's always a 5, 6, somebody's a high scorer, somebody's a low scorer. But the way you communicate will start to create and role model that kind of dialogue and that kind of communication. So that will become normal, at least normative for your team. It might not be normal for your culture, but at least it creates that safety within that group. So culture for sure, I think, if there's a sense of, if I listen to what you're saying, there's a sense of punishment, scarcity, there's different words I can throw at all of that are not abundance mentality and high tides all boats rise kind of sense. So if you don't have it in your organization, the kind of culture that you want, you can at least, as a team, as a leader, commit to doing and being a certain way that can create trust and psychological safety for your group that hopefully becomes contagious. And Alex, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going to turn it back over to you. Yeah,
we use a term called jeopardy free. And so, if you're going to look at, where you're, walking into an environment which is jeopardy free. So that's sort of opening up that dialogue to say it's okay. Because we've already set the standards of what we say as a group that is acceptable. When we talk about jeopardy free, it's that inquiring and making sure that people are curious in that space and actually ring fencing the space to say, look, it's a safe environment. We want to throw some ideas around, but it's also okay to say, actually, if I'm the person today that I'm not having the greatest day, please don't not participate. Be present and just be, because you're always going to take something in. But it's just making sure that you are watching for those withdrawals as well.
I think the thing with culture, I'll just be honest, I get really triggered by this part of the conversation because they're inseparable. The people influence the culture and the culture influence the people, and they're pretty much one and the same because the culture is the sum total of the people who are there. And so we get, especially in HR, we get caught up in this sort of like finger pointing type of thing, and it's hard to kind of tease out how much is the culture, however we define that, how is that impacting our people? And it does. And I can say, we've been talking about psychological safety. It's one of the things I think we are getting so wrong from a like token, go through the motions, checkbox mentality in corporate America. Maybe New Zealand doesn't have this. By the way, I need to come to New Zealand because I just love that all the sayings and stuff you have. There's like, let's tell everybody it's a safe place. Let's just like tell them that. We'll write it down. We'll put it in the handbook. This is a safe place. Who gets to say it's a safe place? Me. When I need to speak up about something and I'm heard and someone acknowledges my fears, my concerns, and then it's handled in a respectful way, that says it's a safe place. Don't you tell me it's a safe place. So we're so caught up in convincing people, tell our employees, let's create psychological safety, that we're not actually doing it. And I think it's one of the hardest things. We're talking about modeling, but that's where the rubber meets the road. And from a cultural perspective, if you tell your people, I've got an open door, I want to hear from you, and they come to you and you tell them what's so, and then like all hell breaks loose, don't tell me it's a safe environment. And any of us have been in HR for any length of time, we all have like a whole war book of stories like that. So I just think this idea of culture, it's complex. I love, Carrie, what you're saying. I always try to think about what's within my own sphere of influence. And today, the culture I might be able to control is me, here in my home office or my family. At work, it might be the 6 people that are on my direct team. And maybe that's all that's within my sphere of influence right now. I'm not going to let the broader toxic culture be an excuse for me. The buck stops here as a leader 100% of the time, or as a parent. And that may be hard. I think peer managers need to establish a really strong set of a peer group so they can go, that's their safe place to go and work it out. But they need to be that sort of shield to create that team culture. And if you build enough strong team cultures, collectively, you can start to influence the organizational culture. But I think there's just so much to say here about how resilience and psychological safety actually work in practice as opposed to just the talking points about it.
Well, the psychological safety also, I mean, influences the engagement level as well. So, and I have worked in organizations where, they preached the psychological safety and checked with employees to see how they felt, and there was action plans. But amongst the executive leadership team, there wasn't safety, and you could see that, you could observe that. There was kind of a, and I the word accountability, I think, is very important. But there's different multiple ways how you hold someone accountable. And I think that when you use it in a toxic way, it can definitely create fear. I should be accountable for my team and my, things, what's happening. But I also, part of that accountability is being able to communicate safely some of the challenges that the team is experiencing and have that be heard. Not just we didn't make it, and so you're not meeting expectations because you didn't make this thing, this goal. It really, accountability is far more than just who am I going to blame for this not working.
Rod's given us one last question, so I'm going to jump in and get it started. And his last question
Okay,
to us
thank you.
is, what's a key strategy leaders can employ to encourage team members to speak truthfully to one another? Speak truthfully themselves. It's been said before on this, be authentic and be honest, and role model it. So that's mine. That's 20 seconds. We got 4 more to go.
Thanks.
I like that vulnerability, certainly, and making sure that you're practicing how you want to be treated yourself with that respect and grace.
I'll share the one thing that's the hardest for me. I'm a strong DI on the DISC model and love public speaking. So my one thing would be to shut up, listen, stop thinking about what you're going to say, and really, really just listen.
Yeah, I think for me, it's say it as it is without sugarcoating it.
Yeah, kindness is clarity.
Excellent. So thank you, everyone. What an amazing panel. We discussed plenty on resilient team building, from psychological safety. We discussed that, trust, culture, just really, really impressive. So thanks, everyone. I look forward to joining you on future Hacking HR panels, and have a good rest of the day, everyone. So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.